There are many phases of life when you have to decide between competing occupations or sources of income. Careers are way less rigid today than they used to be before, and more people switch not only workplaces but entire occupational branches more and more frequently. This is especially true for those of us who are interested in personal development. As I delve more and more into this field, I'm having a really hard time finding someone who didn't undergo significant shifts in their careers, and many going even more radical and completely revamping their lifestyles. There are people becoming entrepreneurs, there are people living on yachts and RVs, people setting up lifestyle businesses and online ways of earning money to be able to pursue a life of perpetual travel. There are many options out there, and if you find yourself being lured to many different ways of getting an income, if you're thinking about a career switch or looking into becoming an entrepreneur and are not sure about your decision, or if you find that your decision has little staying power, keep listening. Welcome to the Valiant Growth Podcast. My name is Philip Frey, and today I will present you a simple but effective framework for making decisions about your job or source of income. As is often the case, however, the tool is less important than the principles behind it. And since going deep is what this podcast is all about, this is where I will begin. You've surely seen people around you making poor choices, be it personal or professional. Maybe you've made some yourself. I know that I have. So naturally the question arises, why are people so poor at making decisions when usually there are so few factors involved in making them? Well, the truth is that very few of us have been given a proper training in decision making by our teachers and parents, and almost none of us have been taught the inward focus, the self-knowledge orientation that it takes to discover our true needs. This is not surprising given the fact that most people we encounter as children not only don't have the self-knowledge and the empathy necessary to teach someone else how to do it, but they very often have agendas of their own that they try to impose on us. Sometimes openly, sometimes in a concealed fashion, but it's almost always there. From parents trying to get their unmet needs or live their ideal lives through the proxy of their children, government agents looking for obedient citizens to tax or to sacrifice in wars of aggression, co-workers, bosses, friends, romantic interests. They're all looking to put us into all sorts of roles and positions that they fancy. Marketers trying to sell us this and that. There's a world of people out there who desperately seek to control, manipulate, and coerce us into their own plans, disregarding our own. And in a sense, they have willing victims, because we often seek to preserve these relationships, as ending them is very difficult, very painful, and we even unconsciously realize that. It also may be that we're playing the same games ourselves in some of our relationships, and as such, a discovery would really threaten the stability of our world. It's no wonder that there's a legion of psychologists and neuroscientists out there trying to show us that our brains are fundamentally flawed and irrational, and they're usually allied with determinists who seek to convince us that there's no free will and we're just pebbles in a mechanistic universe. It's not new brains or a new universe that we should seek, however, but the courage, skills, and support systems that can plant our feet firmly in the ground and start working on what is truly important for us. But courage alone is not sufficient. It also just takes a lot of skill building and inward focus and a commitment to being conscious in the present. a commitment of not defaulting on our responsibility to think about our own goals. But if we combine these two, and they go hand in hand, we have a great opportunity to improve our lives and to make good decisions. And careers and jobs are a great place to begin with this. I firmly believe that for most people, if they had the courage to look into their occupational choices and the commitment to stay with the discovery, even if it is painful, most of them would find that they're pursuing careers chosen by others for them, or careers that bring rewards that others consider important and not them. In a way, I feel I'm saying nothing new, and this is a well-known thing in society, but very few people seem to act on it. And the truth is, this might be your case as well. Or it might just be that you've gained a great deal more information since your initial choice, or your aims have changed, and now you're in a position where you're torn between the inertia of the past and the beckoning call of the future. I mean, let's be honest, most career choices are made way before we really have the information to make an enlightened choice, even if there's nobody conspiring to guide us into this or that vision of the world that they have. How much does an 18-year-old really understand all the nuances that go into the different careers, what lifestyle they presume, what kind of resource investment they take, what kind of growth potential there is in them? So very often there is room for change. And I chose to focus on the principles first in this podcast because that's where the most value is. And once you understand the need for consciousness in these choices, and you can muster the courage to actually look into them and make changes if necessary, and when preferably you have a support system that can help you with this, the solution really just flows naturally out of it. It is a self-knowledge journey. It is an inward focus on what is most important to you. And the approach that I present in the podcast on defining your purpose will serve you well in this case as well. So now I'm going to go through the technique itself. So begin with writing down every aspect of a job that is important to you. And there are many obvious ones, and they're often talked about, or almost exclusively talked about. The salary, the bonuses, the hours, the commute, where the company is. But there are other factors that you should consider as well, such as the genuine growth potential involved, the people in the business, and whatever else is important to you. I don't want to override your preferences with mine. And once you've written down everything that is important to you, give it a definition as well. This means it takes more time, but it will really clarify your thinking. So you might say, well, I like flexibility in a job, but what does flexibility in a job really mean? Does it mean that you can go home anytime you want? Does it mean that you don't even have to go into the office? To some employers, it seems to mean that you're on call all the time. So it's important to define the terms. And once you've defined the terms, the next step will be pretty easy, which is to set up scales, set up a system for grading a job. So if any job is given to you, I say quickly electrician, employee, you can look at what's important to you, you can look at what's valuable to you, and you can very quickly grade it. So you might say, for instance, that having time freedom is important to you and that you don't want to work more than necessary. And the less you can work, the more time you have for your own pursuits. This is not the only view that's possible on this question, but that's one. And I'll use this for the example. So let's say that you really like time freedom. So if you were setting up a scale, and I recommend using 5 steps in it. So for instance, with work time, you could say, starting from acceptable, which is 40 to 50 hours, and then moving on to good, which is 30 to 40, great, which is 20 to 30, excellent, which is 10 to 20, and unbelievable, which is less than 10. This could be an example of a scale to be used. Or to give an example that's less quantifiable, let's say that the quality of the people you're working with is very important or is a factor to you. So you could say, okay, so on an acceptable level, I want co-workers, bosses, clients, suppliers, etc., who are not dangerous and tolerable. You could say that's acceptable. Then next level, you could say, okay, maybe they should be intelligent and interesting. That would make it even better. Next step, how about they're not only intelligent and interesting, but they're actually rational, positive people who are growing in their lives. We're getting into better and better territories. Now, next level, you could say, okay, what if they're not only all of this, but they're also really honest and really just in their dealings. Justice pervades their actions. And then you could set a 5th level where it's all of this plus add whatever you consider significant. And you should create these scales for every single aspect that is important to you that you've written down previously, so that you can grade any job that comes in with ease, and you're less influenced by subjective whims, and you can have an opinion that is more rooted in what is important to you globally as opposed to what is important to you in that very moment. So once you have this set up and you have a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 3, use anything you like. I like 5 because it stretches you a little bit. Once you have this, I like using something a little bit mathematical. It's not very complicated to some, and I was a little bit hesitant of bringing it in because some of you will see it as I'm explaining something that's really, really obvious, and others will see it as unnecessarily complicated. But bear with me, I will do my best to explain it. So those of you who are familiar with weighted averages need no further explanation. Those of you who are unfamiliar with the idea, basically what you do is, and I will simplify the idea. Say that you have 100 points, and you have to decide how important each of these aspects of a job is to you by allocating points to them. So if something is extremely important and it makes up most of your decision to the detriment of everything else, you could add a really high value to it, like 50 or 60. If it's less important, you can add 10. And just make sure that the end result is 100, and just play around with the numbers and really, really think about what is important to you. And really the value of the system is in this step. This is where the most added value is. And I recommend this because I've done it myself, and I've used this myself when I was making a decision, and it really helped me realize the fact that many of the things that I was focusing on are not that important to me. So when I combine the values assigned to the commute time, the commute cost, the stability of the income, how many hours I have to work per week, if I have control or not over when I actually work, and the actual salary, and I combine the values of all of these, they are still below the learning potential, which I ranked as the most important thing to me. And I think that if you do the same kind of ranking, you will really gain a lot of clarity on the subject. So once you've done this, once you've assigned the weights, and this is even better done in percentages, but if that sounds complicated to stick to the point. So once you have these set up, your system is ready and you can plug any job or income earning activity into it. And what you will do is you will be calculating a score, which then you can use to compare jobs and income earning sources. What you will do is simply take the score that that each aspect gets on your scale, multiply it by the number of points for each aspect, and in the end, add them up. And if you've been working with a 1 to 5 scale, your potential maximum is 500. So if a job gets a 5 on everything and you add them together, it should get to 500. And if a job is only the lowest level, which I call acceptable, I don't recommend going below acceptable. There's no point taking a job that is not acceptable to you. So if every aspect is a 1, you would get 100 in the end. So all of your points, all of your job evaluations will range between 100 and 500. And simply comparing the scores for 2 jobs can give you clarity insofar as which one is more connected to what is really important to you. So just to give you a very simple example, let's say that you have 3 factors, and the first of them is flexibility, which you've given 50 points. The second is income, which you've given 20 points. And the third is commute time, which you've given 20 points. And let's say that flexibility gets a score of 4, income gets a score of 2, and commute gets a score of 5. So what you do here is multiply. On flexibility, it's 50 times 4, that's 200. The income is 30 times 2, that's 60. And the commute is 20 times 5, which is 100. So in the end, you get 360, which is basically a pretty average score. That's a little bit better than average, the middle point being 300. And you can take another job, put the scores in, you get 280, the answer is clear. And you can also see why this job is potentially valuable. So you can see that with this example, though income is more important to you than the commute time, because the commute time is so good and the income is not that good, you actually get more points in the end from the commute time. So that's what this job really shines on. And for those of you who want to be a bit more mathematically sophisticated, I would suggest going with percentages, so multiplying by percentages and going from 0 to 4 instead of 1 to 5 with your grades, and that way you can get a score that is exactly from 0% to 100%. But that is absolutely optional and the points work just as well. So I'm curious how you got on with this system, and please leave me some feedback on the Valiant Growth Facebook page or write me an email at valiantgrowth@gmail.com. I'm really curious if I got through with this explanation. And this is in fact a very simple tool used for decision making, and it's actually taught as part of decision making tools in management education. At least I've learned it there, but even beyond that, it is simply using weighted averages. And the focus, as I said in the beginning, is not so much on the tool. The focus is on helping you really identify what is important to you. And if you say, this tool doesn't make sense to me, or I don't like this numerical approach and I want to do my own thing, absolutely do it. As long as you've done the inward-looking work of defining what is important to you in a job, you have gained great value from your work and from this podcast. And this can be extended to other fields as well. And it can get really exciting. You can basically apply it for any decision in your life. Just list the aspects, list the criteria, set up a scale, and do the maths, and you have an answer. You have a clear answer there. And the reason why I decided to do a podcast about this and to sell it a little bit is that I've actually done it, and becoming a podcaster is one of those choices that gave me a really, really high score. And I didn't make the choice just based on that, but it was a very strong influence on me. Actually, were you to talk to me a year ago, I was very interested in web design, but once I designed the system and I plugged it in, it really helped me realize that it's not a bad job, but it doesn't connect to some of my core needs, some of the things that I'm looking for, and this does. So Valiant Growth is partly because of this tool, and you might find something very cool yourself as a result of this approach. Thank you for listening to the Valiant Growth podcast, and I dare you to flourish today.